When someone dies, their soul is supposed to go to the afterlife, but that's not always the case, and that's scary. From terrifying final moments to spirits that still haunt hospitals and morgues, these are moments when the dead have returned. Get ready, because what I am about to show you in case number 5 will make you never want to be alone in a hospital again. Final goodbye. Her job is stressful. Imagine this woman's. She was finishing cleaning a coffin for a ceremony, and when she turned her back, what seemed like a horror movie became reality. As soon as she started to walk away, the coffin lid began to lift, and it wasn't the wind. You could clearly see a hand pushing the door from the inside. She saw the movement, didn't think twice, and flew out of the room. If you work in this field and you see a hand sticking out of a coffin, HR is the last thing you're looking for. You're looking for the exit. Whether it was a farewell or something more sinister trying to return, the fact is that the security footage left everyone sleepless. Sliding figure. A nurse was filming her colleague resting in a chair during her shift. Everything seemed normal until something moved in the background. A shadowy figure simply glided down the hallway, crossing from one side to the other. The worst was yet to come. The same figure reappeared, but this time crawling on the ground in a completely bizarre and unnatural way. It didn't look like a person, it looked like something different. Security cameras also captured employees in shock, slowly backing away as they tried to process what they were seeing. Working the shift is tough enough, but having to deal with a creeping entity and being ignored by management is even worse. It is requested immediate dismissal. Whether it was a lost soul or a phenomenon that science can't explain, the scare was genuinely real. Red-faced figure. If you enjoy exploring mysterious places, this story will make you want to stay far away from abandoned hospitals. What was meant to be just an informal vlog recording ended up becoming the scariest video on the internet. The guy was filming a room full of hospital furniture when the camera focused on something bizarre. On one of the beds, a figure that looked like a witch was sitting, completely still, with long hair covering her entire face. The atmosphere was already tense, but it worsened in seconds. Slowly, the figure tilted her head toward him, revealing a red and horrifying face that no one was expecting. It was the signal he needed to run. Terrifying moment. This account, straight from a hospital in Texas, will make you question what really happens in our final moments. What the cameras captured is so disturbing that even those who deal with death every day will find it shocking. It was for almost 2 minutes straight. The body began to behave in a bizarre way. It wasn't a quick movement. It was something continuous and terrifying that paralyzed everyone in the room. You know what's even stranger? The doctors did nothing. They were genuinely terrified because they had never seen anything like it with that intensity. Nobody could explain what they were seeing. Resurrection. On November 30th of last year, security cameras at a morgue recorded a scene that looked straight out of a horror movie. The doctor was there, sitting in his chair, putting the final touches on the last details of the job. Everything seemed calm until he felt a strange movement coming from behind him. When he turned around to see what it was, he was confronted with the most horrifying scene of his entire career. It wasn't just a little scare. The guy was overcome with panic and ran out of the room without looking back. Hospital possession. The man had been paralyzed and dependent on life support for 2 years, zero movement, zero reaction, until the unthinkable happened. Out of nowhere, his body began to convulse with bizarre violence. He struggled so much that he almost fell out of bed. A nurse rushed to help immediately, and the staff had to restrain him until he calmed down. Mysterious apparition. This footage from Indonesia will leave you thinking for a long time. What the security camera captured looks like a glitch in the matrix, but it's chilling. In the images, you can see what appears to be a person standing right at the foot of the bed, staring intently at the patient. Up to that point, it could be anyone, but the bizarre detail comes now. A family member of the patient arrives for the visit and simply crosses the figure. It was as if she were made of smoke. The guy didn't even notice someone was there, acting as if nothing was in his way. The video went viral, and the main theory, it's a deceased relative stopping by to check on their loved one who is hospitalized. Hospital haunting. The security guard was on duty when out of nowhere he saw a hospital bed appear alone in the hallway, and it wasn't empty. There was a dark, human-shaped figure moving in it in a super slow and bizarre way. The detail that makes it all the more sinister, that corridor led directly to the old hospital's morgue, which was deactivated and ready to be renovated. The security guard's terror was not unfounded. 6 days earlier, he had already seen on the cameras a ghostly shape like smoke hovering over a stretcher inside that same empty morgue. Gary is already known as a city with many abandoned places and tense stories, but a hospital where the beds go to the morgue on their own is enough to shatter any skepticism. Whether it was a ghost or an inexplicable bug in reality, the security guard did the right thing by running away. Creepy morgue. A nurse entered the room just to do a routine check on a body. She stayed only a few seconds and left thinking everything was in perfect order. As soon as she closed the door, the bizarre thing began. The body, still covered by the sheet, began to slowly rise above the mucker. He simply stood there, levitating in the air without any visible support. If the nurse had returned a second earlier and seen the body floating, the shock would have been historic. When science cannot explain the movement of someone who has already passed, the mystery becomes a mandatory topic in any conversation about the supernatural. Dark and hazy figure. The nurse was walking calmly when suddenly a dark, smoky shape appeared out of nowhere at the end of the corridor. It wasn't a shadow, it wasn't a reflection, it was something dense. As soon as the figure appeared, the doors at the end of the corridor opened with absurd violence, as if something was in a great hurry to get through. The force was so great that it almost ripped the doors off their hinges. This is where the brain glitches. Those doors were locked. They opened onto a wing of the hospital that wasn't even being used. In other words, there was no one inside to open them, and the wind wouldn't have been strong enough to overcome the lock. The nurse could only stand there, staring in disbelief as the doors closed on their own shortly afterwards. Nurse's spirit. As the group walked through the empty corridors, one of them froze. He saw a person in a blue surgical gown peeking through a door. They turned on their flashlight and began to follow the figure, but then came the shock. It simply passed through a wall and vanished into thin air. Years earlier, in 1995, this hospital experienced a real tragedy. A nurse, exhausted from months of overwork, ended up dying after contracting a contagious disease on her shift. In the rush, she didn't even have time to take the proper medical precautions. The group connected the dots immediately. The figure they saw was exactly the same nurse who gave her life for the hospital decades ago. It seems she still feels it's her duty to look after the corridors. There are places where the energy is so heavy that not even the strongest flashlight in the world can fix it. If you see someone walking through doorways in an abandoned hospital, the best remedy is to run far away. Reaper. While lying in bed, the man saw a tall, dark figure standing right next to another patient's bed. The silhouette was identical to the classic image of death, simply observing and waiting. The most bizarre thing, no one else in the room seemed to notice the presence of that figure, even with the incredibly heavy atmosphere that had settled in. It was as if it were on a frequency that only the camera and the patient could pick up. The patient who was recording felt a mixture of panic and relief upon realizing that the visit wasn't for him. Unfortunately, the patient next to him did not survive and passed away shortly afterwards. As soon as he was gone, the Grim Reaper also vanished into thin air. The patient's revenge. If you think an empty hospital is scary, imagine one that's losing doctors and patients because nobody can stand what's going on inside anymore. Last year, a unit in Sydney, Australia, became the center of a mystery that's driving authorities crazy. The level of bizarreness reached its peak when reports of patients being possessed began to emerge. It was no longer just impression, it was something physical and terrifying affecting those who were hospitalized. With fear taking hold, employees resigned and patients fled to other hospitals. Since no one can discover the real cause of this infestation, the hospital risks closing its doors forever soon. Scary video. What the cameras captured in a morgue is the kind of thing that makes even the bravest person want to run away. Out of nowhere, one of the stretchers began sliding across the room on its own, as if someone invisible were calmly pushing it. A moment later, a second table also decided to join the dance and moved. But that wasn't the worst part. The body that was on the second stretcher began to straighten up slowly, as if it was sitting up to talk without anyone touching it. Many people tried to say it was a draft, but if it had been wind, everything else in the room would have moved. The room remained motionless. Only the two stretchers and the body decided to come to life. Scary woman. A solitary figure was spotted walking down the street, but the movement was strange, almost as if she were floating above the asphalt. She was wearing white clothes that seemed to glow on their own in the dark. Her long hair covered her entire face, but what really blew everyone's mind was her arm. It stretched far beyond normal ideals, breaking any rule of human proportions. It was something totally distorted. The locals had no doubts. They began whispering about the legendary Churail, a spirit from folklore that roams at midnight in search of victims. Some people tried to say it was a camera malfunction or a bad angle, but after giving the play and seeing the way that thing was moving, it became impossible to ignore that something was very wrong there.
Disturbing video from a morgue. A security guard experienced a true moment of panic when he decided to investigate a strange noise coming directly from the morgue. He stood there, torn between curiosity and fear, observing. But the invisible visitor didn't stop there. Moments later, objects began flying around the room, traversing it with bizarre speed. The security guard wasn't stupid. As soon as the object started levitating, he backed away and got out of there immediately. The morgue was empty, but the record of that impossible activity was captured. There are some things you only believe when you see them, and even then you doubt them. Whether it was a rare physical phenomenon or an entity trying to make an appearance, the fact is that this security guard will never face the 3 a.m. shift the same way again. White figure. The employee was pushing a coffin down the hallway when out of nowhere a white figure, almost human in shape, appeared right in front of him. It wasn't just a fleeting blur or a smudge on the lens. On reviewing the recording, everyone was shocked by the clarity of the figure. It took shape for a brief instant, long enough to be seen clearly before disappearing without a trace. When the image is so clear that you can't blame it on the lighting or dust, the mystery reaches a whole new level. If the doctor himself found the image important enough to share, you know things were out of the ordinary. Scary hand. If you have a habit of leaving your foot outside the covers, this story will make you change that habit today. A man was resting in a clinic here in Brazil when he experienced what everyone fears most in a dark room. The images showed a huge dark shape emerging from under the bed, and it wasn't just any shape. It clearly looked like a giant human hand materializing there. Slowly, the creature stretched its arm toward the man's leg. The moment he felt its touch, he jumped out of bed with a fright that almost stopped his heart. The scare was so intense that after that terrifying night, the man avoided that clinic for a long time. He wouldn't go back there even if he were ordered to. Strange incidents in hospitals. You know that old saying, hospitalized patients see things. Well, at this hospital, the staff discovered the hard way that things were much worse. What the control room caught on camera will send chills down your spine. Everything changed when an employee was watching the cameras in the control room and the unthinkable happened. A shadowy figure out of nowhere appeared next to a sedated patient. The shadow not only appeared but hovered over the bed and then stayed there motionless right beside him. That was enough time for everyone in the control room to go into shock and realize that the patients had been telling the truth all along. If you enjoyed this video and want to discover more mysteries that science can't explain, don't forget to leave a like. This really helps the channel grow. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next cases that will keep you up at night. Thanks for watching until the end, and we'll see you in the next mystery, if you dare.